Hello and welcome to I Want to Fight Araki, a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure close analysis podcast. I'm Thomas,
And I am Emily.
and guys, gals, non-binary pals, we're here. We are at Battle Tendency. Feels good to be revisiting these episodes.
It's a glorious moment. I'm so
Uh,
excited.
I'm so excited. So, with that being said, let's get into the summary of the first two episodes of Battle
Get into the
Tendency.
tea.
So, 50 years after Dio and Jonathan's final battle, Speedwagon has become a wealthy oil tycoon in the United States and has invited Straightso on an expedition to Mexico. A Speedwagon-funded research team has discovered not just a petrified man, but several stone masks hidden in a temple. The man seems to be exhibiting life signs, and so Speedwagon asks Straightso to destroy the masks and this, quote, pillar man. Meanwhile, in New York, we see a young black teenager named Smokey Brown making money off of pickpocketing tourists. He's caught by the cops who beat on him and attempt to blackmail him, but before they can do more damage, a brown-haired Englishman steps in. He breaks one of the officer's nose and finger and charges a soda bottle with Hamon, launching the cap with enough force to break the other cop's finger. The man and Smokey run away from the scene, and the man introduces himself as Joseph Joestar, grandson of Jonathan Joestar. Back in Mexico, Straightso kills the expedition team and reveals to Speedwagon that he has always been jealous of Dio's power, and now that his Hamon is failing to slow down his aging, he is going to become immortal by turning himself into a vampire. Once he does so, he explains that after he kills Speedwagon, he will kill Joseph and Arena to maintain the secret of the mask. In New York, some time has passed, and Smokey has been taken in by Arena and Jojo. After going to a restaurant, Jojo gets in a scuffle with a minor mob figure. After the mobster says various things about Smokey. In this fight, Jojo demonstrates his observation skills and is able to predict where the mobster's weapons are hidden and even what he is going to say. Jojo wins the fight, and the mobster's boss thanks Jojo for taking the man down a few pegs. The mobster's boss explains to the group, however, that the death of Speedwagon at the hands of Straightso. Jojo and Arena are shocked by the information, and while Jojo believes the boss, he still punches him in the stomach for not bracing Arena for the news. A few days later, Jojo and Smokey are chatting in a restaurant, and Jojo notices Straightso outside. Jojo is able to put together that Straightso has become a vampire, and rather than waiting for him to be attacked, he unloads a full clip of a machine gun onto Straightso. Straightso survives the hail of bullets and attempts to kill Jojo using his eyeball lasers, but is thrown off his game when Jojo is able to survive holes to his head and throat. Jojo reveals that he has used the mirror-like chandelier in the restaurant to trick Straightso, and while Straightso is distracted, Jojo punches Straightso with a Hamon-charged fist. Straightso is sent flying, but reveals the power of Hamon was absorbed by his scarf, interwoven with the stomachs of rare beetles that conduct Hamon. Jojo is shocked, but also has another trick up his sleeve, a grenade he covertly attached to Straightso's scarf. Straightso is able to deflect the grenade, but as he does so, it is revealed that the grenade was attached by a string to a multitude of other grenades which have their pins pulled as the first grenade is tossed by Straightso. The resultant explosion destroys not just the scarf, but tears Straightso's body apart. Straightso begins to heal, and Jojo and Smokey run away in order to get some distance from the vampire. Jojo and Smokey wind up on a bridge, but Straightso is there to greet them with a hostage. Jojo initially dismisses the threat, but after some taunting by Straightso, Jojo is led into a fight with the vampire once more. Straightso attempts to finish the fight once again with his eyeball lasers, but Jojo uses Hamon-charged shot glasses from the restaurant to deflect the beams back at Straightso. The beam knocks Straightso off guard, and using one final Hamon-charged punch, Jojo sends Straightso flying off the bridge. Just before he plunges into the deep, Jojo rescues Straightso, looking for answers about Speedwagon and his crew. Straightso is vague, but explains that Jojo will soon face the Pillar Man, and that if he wants answers, he should head to Mexico before using his own Hamon to end his life. In Mexico, we see that a covert Nazi force has excavated the Pillar Man, and that the sadistic Major von Stroheim has saved Speedwagon's life in his search for answers, and that he is attempting to free the Pillar Man from his petrification to further the power of the Nazi regime, all while Jojo heads for the Nazi base and his destined conflict with the Pillar Man. End of episodes.
A multitude of grenades.
Yes. That was a very difficult scene to summarize just because there's a lot of tricking
Shenanigans.
and shenanigans going on.
See,
Yeah.
this is why I feel like collectively, the four of us who in our little squad who watched the show, I feel if all of us like collectively just love Joseph.
Yes.
I feel like he's like our collective favorite Joestar.
And I think that is a great place to just get this discussion rolling, because yeah, if you guys couldn't put together from the summary, Joseph is a very different hero compared to his grandfather.
Oh, I have words about him.
He is um, much more of a trickster. He is, I mean, he
He's
uses
just a bastard.
he is kind of a bastard. I mean, he rubs his intelligence and his like wit in people's faces. I think it's also very telling that like even though he is skilled with Hamon and he is talented with Hamon, he that's not usually like his go-to for a situation. He usually likes to like mess with people first. Like he uses that machine gun on Straitso, and
He likes to pull
um,
fast ones.
he likes to pull fast ones, and that's
All the
really
fast ones.
the most defining parts of his character. And we'll probably get deeper into it as we proceed along with this season. But I mean, they really throw him into sharp contrast. There's even a scene where um, there's a flashback scene that I didn't bring up in the summary because it didn't really add a ton, but like Speedwagon's plane has been taken over by like, hostage takers or terrorists, and Joseph is like totally indifferent to the situation, and he only gets involved when I believe he like either one of the hostage takers either insults him or like takes away his comic book or something like that.
What happens was that it was like he was just sitting there like, I go away, I'm just like reading comic books, and then like he hits him in the face with a rifle, and then
Yeah,
like his nose starts bleeding and the blood gets on his suit, and like the suit was apparently a gift from Arena, and he just goes apeshit.
yeah, he fucks up all those guys. He crashes the plane. And you compare that to the first time we see Jonathan as a teenager, and he's very knightly, valorant. He saves Arena from some bullies, and the first image we see of this JoJo as a younger teenager, he's still technically a teenager in the present day, is him being a bastard. Like,
He's just an absolute bastard.
so you said you had some words about Joseph Joestar. Do you
Oh
want to get
yeah,
into that?
I have some notes. I have only one page of notes because we're only going after 2 episodes, but like, yeah, I have that. And then I also have like a separate thing where I was like trying to rank the protagonists. And the only protagonist I wrote anything about yet so far is Joseph, because he was my favorite one.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a whole thing. I'm trying to like organize my thoughts because these are not organized. The first thing that I have written here though is that this is just like a common thing in shonen in general, where it's just they don't really write protagonists very well because they're supposed to be like a character that you can not really relate, well maybe kind of relate to, but it's just someone who is just like objectively good. And
Right.
also like shonen protagonists are also like one of the main things driving the plot forward, so they have to like have this specific type of personality. They have to be like pretty much righteous and good, but also very like determined and often hot-headed. Just like y'all know the stereotypical shonen protagonist.
Right.
Y'all
Although,
know that vibe, right? Like Natsu from Fairy Tail. I don't like Fairy Tail, but that's just like the most basic ass example that I can think of, because I feel like that's the most basic ass anime to ever exist, in all
yeah,
honesty.
Fairy Tail is actually a guilty pleasure for me. But
Ooh,
I would say that I don't really feel though like Joseph Joestar is like
exactly, he's not.
as
That's where I'm going
generic
with this.
shonen protagonist as Jonathan is.
He's not. That's where I'm going with this. And that's why I like him so much, because he's the only like protagonist of any like the first like protagonist I think of that he kind of reminds me of is our boy Odysseus.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote in here that he's
We're
like an
getting all
Odysseus type character.
mythological.
He's like an Odysseus type character where he's just a shitlord. He just uses, instead of like, he's has some like shonen, you know, traits of like a shonen protagonist. He's very determined, he's very like hot-headed, he's angry, he's temperamental, but at the same time he's not like super righteous and good. He cares like mostly about him. He cares about like three people, and that's him, Arena, and Speedwagon. He does not care about anyone. And then like maybe Smokey, because they like become buddies, and possibly Caesar. They also become buddies. Maybe even Lisa Lisa, you know, that's his mom. Okay, he cares about a few people, but like as clearly shown by the hostage situation TM, when like Straitso takes this helpless person hostage and like pulls out one of her teeth. He's like, I don't even know that woman.
Yeah.
He just like, he calls him a moron. He's like, Straitso, you moron. I don't even know her. What do you expect me to do?
Yeah.
So it's just like, he's not like a knightly person. He doesn't want to go around saving anyone. Saving everyone. He'll go around and save the people that he likes, but not just any random person, because he protects himself and he protects the people that he knows.
Yeah.
And he's also he's like a trickster god as well. As you said, he just likes to mess with people. He's like an asshole, but he's also a good dude at the same time, because he's just like, let's not forget that like very lovely moment that Giovanna cannot stop quoting, "You better calm down or I may have to make out with you." After he like literally pulls a Tommy gun out of his ass. And I wrote down here one of the quotes that we have written in the legendary quote book, that I remember you saying something along the lines of, "You know what they don't tell you about Haman is that it allows you to expand your ass from 9 inches to 18 inches." In order for him to store that Tommy gun in there, because he literally just pulls it out of his ass and just,
I
like,
have no idea
shoots.
where he gets the Tommy gun, where he gets the grenades for that matter. I mean,
Yeah, that's a good question, because there was at least like 8 grenades.
Yeah, and like how he has like
those are military grade weapons.
He has attached a string like to all those grenades to the one grenade. I mean, it's awesome to look at. I mean, sort of makes you question, but I think that sort of ties into the sort of trickster archetype. Is that, I mean,
how did he do it? Who knows? He just can.
The trickster archetype in terms of like normal storytelling is all about like they are people with like incredible wit and like incredible intelligence, and like that's what gets them out of binds and scrapes and stuff. And I mean, I think physically Joseph, I mean, even after all the stuff that happens later, I think physically Joseph is not as strong as Jonathan is in terms of using Haman, but what gives him the edge is his intelligence. And it is very sort of reminiscent of Dio in a way from Phantom Blood, in that Dio is a very intelligent sort of figure. They both sort of are emotional guys when it comes to, you know, certain situations. But I think Joseph does a better job, like we sort of brought up in Phantom Blood, how Dio kind of hates the fact that he is emotional at times, whereas Joseph is like, has the perfect understanding that he is a prankster, that he is a shitlord, that he is, you know, a dude who is just like intentionally an asshole to so many people, and he accepts that, and that's why he's our good guy. Is like he accepts the parts of himself that he doesn't like and that other people don't like, but because he accepted it, like he knows where he stands with everyone else, is I guess what I'm going for.
That's I definitely have written down here. I was also going to compare him to Dio for pretty much that same reason, because And also because he's sort of like a slightly morally ambiguous character. Like
Hmm.
he's kind of an asshole. Like he's not like the best person. He's just
No.
he's not just incredibly knightly like Jonathan. He didn't save that girl, you know. Why would he? He didn't know her. He also just like but he's so interesting to talk about. He's also like let's not forget the fact that he cheated on his wife. He's
Right.
like comedically perverted. He's very silly. He's just kind of he also just like shoots up an entire cafe just completely just to get Straight-So, but there was other people in there too that he had like the danger of like almost killing, but
Yeah,
he does it
Smokey is in
anyway.
there.
I think Smokey was like right next to him.
I think there is a shot of Smokey. He's like up against the wall, and he's like looking at the bullets going through the glass.
Just
Or,
like what?
but
He's just an impulsive bastard, and he's like totally fine with being an impulsive bastard. And I feel like that's why he's just so likable. It's because he's very flawed, and he's not like entirely a very good person, but he's just very silly, and people can relate to him more because of that, because he's not the best person. It's like, yeah, would you risk your life to save this random person you don't know? Probably not, because it would be risking your life and you don't know them. It's just how it be.
yeah, we sort of. I think in general, Battle Tendency has a theme of subverting expectations that were built up in Phantom Blood. Is that we have a like Joseph is like very much the opposite of Jonathan and his heroics. We have sort of the character who's going to be the Speedwagon of this story. Von Stroheim is a very different character to who
Oh yeah.
Speedwagon is. Um, I'm Caesar is a very different Zappelli from his grandfather. I mean, we haven't gotten to Caesar yet, but this whole season we're going to be, I mean, at least I'm going to be talking about like how this
Caesar
is
salad.
just so different from season one in terms of everything, like thematics, characters, um, tone, because I think this is, in terms of tone, this is, it's probably either this or Diamond is Unbreakable that is the most comedic tone
Oh
of
yes,
the
definitely.
JoJo parts. I mean, this is a really funny show in a lot. This is a really funny season in a lot of uh, different, unexpected ways, shall we say?
I do gotta say that, like, I've told you this definitely before, but I feel like there's a lot of comedy anime out there that are like kind of funny. Like, there's been a few that I've watched. I'm like, yeah, this made me smile. It made me giggle a few times. But like, laughter is sort of like a social thing. Normally, you only laugh really hard if you're with other people
Hmm.
because it's a social thing. And
Right.
normally, it's not often that you find yourself laughing hysterically while you're alone, unless you're watching JoJo, because it is probably the funniest anime I've ever seen, and it's not even like a comedy TM. It's not really. It's definitely, I would consider it very comedic, but it's like the branding is not a comedy. It's not a show that is made entirely to do comedy. It's sort of a side thing that improves upon it. And yet, because of that, and because of like just the way, like all the stupid shit that Araki just comes up with
Right.
is just hilarious. Like
I would
I feel
say,
like part four had me like just there was even part three had me like laughing my ass off when I was completely alone, and part two did especially. Like most of the show after part one, there was parts where I was just like in my room completely alone, just laughing because something really hilarious happened.
yeah, I would say JoJo is probably more of a comedy compared to other shonen anime, like like Fairy Tail or Dragon Ball Z or whatever. Um,
A lot of the
because
comedy in shonen and in a lot of like comedy TMs is kind of dry. I've noticed it's sort of overused. There's like that specific brand of anime comedy that's just like gets boring after a while.
Right.
I don't know how to describe it, but it's just, you know, all you
I mean,
weebs
you
out
tend to
there
see
who
the
have
same.
consistently watched it.
You tend to see the same jokes, I find, across a lot of different anime.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and JoJo is not like that. I mean, I think what makes it so funny is like the image of JoJo or Joseph and Straitso just having a normal conversation. I mean, he can sort of tell something's up. And then just out of nowhere, he pulls out the machine gun. Is like that is such a funny moment, even though it's like it's like you said, it's like dry humor, you know?
It's just I feel like it's just something that comes with the ridiculousness of the plot. Like the plot is over, like just completely ridiculous. So you'd expect like it to be funny as well. And I'm so excited for when we get to part 4 and I can talk about probably the moment in the show that made me laugh the hardest.
Mm-hmm.
It just got me. And then there was like, I remember one time I was watching part 3 in my room in college. My roommate was in there. We know Brandon. He was in there like doing homework or something. And suddenly I just start laughing because I got to the part in part 3 where like, you know, that one episode.
Yes.
What was it called? Hail to You, that one with
Oh
Polnareff
yeah,
and Abdul.
Polnareff Land.
Yeah, Polnareff. It wasn't that. It was when like the two of them were like, it was that moment when they were like, shall we like indulge in
Oh
the
yeah, yeah,
ancient
yeah.
ritual of male bonding and take a piss together? And I just lost it. And my roommate was like, what the hell are you laughing at?
I don't
And I
think
was
that's
like, you gotta see this.
I don't think that's the funniest episode of part 3,
It's
but
not, but like that's the one that I
it's
like
definitely up
remember
there.
the most.
Um, we'll save that for our part 3 discussion. So let's see. Well, I guess as long as we're talking about comedy, I would say that's another subversive element of Battle Tendency as opposed to Phantom Blood. Is Phantom Blood is not really a funny show.
It's funny
Um,
sometimes. Like every once in a while, Zeppeli will just do something stupid.
yeah, I mean, but I always feel like the comedy in Phantom Blood is like a lot more strained than it
Yeah,
is in Battle Tendency. I mean, there's much more of a comedic presence in Battle Tendency. Like the colors are just lighter. I mean, a lot of this show takes place, a lot of the season takes place in the daytime as opposed to Phantom Blood, which, I mean, that season was 9 episodes and probably 6 of them take place at night, you know?
it's a good vibe though. It's a good aesthetic,
It is a good aesthetic. I
but
mean,
it's not like a comedic aesthetic. Well, it can be actually.
I don't mean to, rag on Phantom Blood's art design. I mean, I think does a pretty good job with that, but it's just yet another way where visually, writing wise, character wise, we were being told that Battle Tendency is not going to be the same show as Phantom Blood. And I think that's kind of interesting. I mean, I think Phantom Blood was a pretty big financial success. I mean, critical success when it came out. You know, people liked that. And then to basically like jack up certain elements of the show to like 11 and scale back elements like the seriousness. Not that there aren't serious episodes in Battle Tendency, but to scale back the seriousness, I mean, that's a really sort of brave move, I think. And I mean, obviously it pays off because it's one of our favorite parts of JoJo for sure.
It's so good, and like when the funniest moments in it to me are the parts that don't seem like intentionally funny, but just seem so over the top that they're hilarious, like the Tommy gun being pulled out of his ass,
Yes.
and the that one part that always gets me is when Cars is falling off a cliff and then he sees flowers at the bottom, and then he just sort of like elbows the wall and then ricochets violently, just bounces off the sides of the cliff, and then just like crashes right next to the flowers, but not on them. He just stands up all nonchalantly. And I remember when I first watched that like a year ago, I was like, I had to pause it because I was like just laughing so much. I was like, that was so dumb.
That's
So
another
good.
great bit.
I loved that bit. I love it. I don't know why. It's just great.
So we talked about how Joseph is different from Straizo, and I kind of want to talk about now how Straizo and Dio are different as our sort of vampiric enemies for the time being.
Straighto's literally just vibing. When he dies, he's just like, yeah, I know I was going to go to hell. I just wanted to go down and feel young and hot again. And then he just like dies. He's just like, I'm totally fine with this. He's just completely and utterly fine with it. And I'm like, okay, go off, sis.
I mean, I think that's probably just kind of in his nature as a warrior. You know, he wants to go out on his own terms. But I think it's interesting. Like Straighto's motivation for becoming a vampire is much more. I mean, he's wrong for wanting to become a vampire, but I think his motivation is much more relatable than Dio's.
Oh yes, it's much less malevolent. He doesn't want to take over the world. He just wants to be young again, just for a hot minute.
Exactly.
He just wants to feel good, not necessarily like bring the whole world down with him because he's sad and edgy.
Yeah, he's not. I mean, he sort of is a standard villain, but I mean, he's one level up of Dio in terms of like maniacal laughing, stuff like that. But I think something that's interesting is that even though Straizo has a much more relatable sort of human reason for becoming a vampire, he goes down like a chump. I mean, in the span of 2 episodes, the Straizo problem is taken care of, and he's using. I mean, he does say that he has not gotten as used to his powers as Dio had by the end of Phantom Blood, but he's still using all of like Dio's, little tricks of the trade, like the eyeball lasers and regeneration and stuff like that.
Eyeball lasers.
But yet, like Joseph, just like he takes him down like really pretty easily.
He's a Tibetan monk. He's fine with it. He just wants to. It was so weird,
Yeah.
He's not a Dio. He's kind of interesting in that way, even though he doesn't like do anything.
And I would say no villain in this season is quite like Dio in terms of their personality and their goals and stuff like that. I mean, this is again enough. We haven't really gotten to the main villains of this season yet, but that's just yet another way this story is being told to us differently.
I must say I enjoy all of the Pillar Men. I feel like each one of them is sort of lacking, but the fact that there's 3 of them, it sort of makes up for it.
I would agree.
It's just they all have that one little thing that I do like about them, and combined as like 3 villains, it's like, okay, they're pretty solid, but just one of them alone is like like Wamu is just like not a typical villain at all, and
Wamu
is just like crazy.
He's the honorable
Wamu is a good boy.
Warrior type. AC/DC is he's gonna win no matter the cost.
AC/DC's on crack.
Yeah, and Cars is sort of a mix of both of them.
Cars is wild.
But yeah. So do you want to talk about the OP at all?
Oh gosh, the OP. The OP though. Wait a minute, I love it. The OP, the animation in the second OP makes me nut so hard. It is gorgeous. It is sexy. I love it.
I love
just all the colors. It's so smooth and just pretty.
Yeah, it very abstract compared to the first one, where there's a lot of like thin like almost everyone is drawn in silhouette, almost, very bright, very colorful.
They experiment with the animation a lot. Like they do those very like colorful silhouettes, and then they do the Pillar Men all like shoddy, and it's very it's good stuff.
I love that part of the
It's
OP
great.
where the Pillar Men are showing off their powers, and it's just super sketchy in terms of art style.
It's just they screw around with the art style so much, and I love it. But then they also have like that traditional like 3D shenanigans, which is great.
The song is really good as well.
It's a bop, yeah.
It is a bop. It's jazz compared to
it's funky.
The first one, which is a rock song, and that's like I think a lot of times the OPs do a good job of reflecting their protagonists. And like Joseph Joestar is like the adventure that we're gonna go on as we cover this series is like it's gonna be fun, it's gonna be wacky, even during some of the more serious moments, Joseph Joestar is gonna be there to like mess with the mood a little bit,
Yes. The first OP though was like the song is like borderline power metal, which I feel like put the vibe a lot because like I didn't know that werewolf metal existed until South Dakota introduced me to it. Like 3 days ago, I listened to Powerwolf for like 2 hours, and it has such a similar vibe.
What is, not to go off on a tangent, but what is werewolf metal?
There's just this one band called Powerwolf, and they're like this European like power metal band who like the lyrics and like the songs are like very much about religion and just like about werewolves. Like that's just it. Like Viking metal.
Yeah.
It's like that, but with werewolves. Okay. It's like Dragon Force, but instead of dragons, there's werewolves. And it actually slaps really hard. It's good stuff.
Well, speaking of musical references, I don't know if you have any insight into the current musical. I mean, there's only one new music reference with Smokey Brown. I don't know.
Smokey Brown, just what? Oh my God, I'm mixing up people's names here. Smokey Robinson and James Brown.
Do you think that has any significance, or just one of the musical references for musical reference sake?
It's a combination of like two very famous like Black musicians, and also. Let's talk about some very interesting things that were introduced within like very early on in the episode. It's just suddenly a commentary on police brutality, police corruption, and racism that all happens in the first episode.
And all taken down with a Coke bottle.
Yeah, it's actually like a surprisingly interesting representation of like the 1930s New York. Yeah, you literally see like this corrupt police officer like harassing this kid. He was harassing him a lot more than he should have been. He did steal a wallet, but it was only a wallet. He didn't hurt anybody.
Right.
And this guy just like full on just
this is one of the weirdest moments.
It's just bad. He picks his nose and sticks a booger on Joseph's face.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a weird, goofy moment. But on like that scene though is like that was the scene where I was like, I love Joseph Joestar as a character.
Oh yeah, he's great.
I mean, the best part, terrific introduction.
He does sort of like save some people only because, he had to get his wallet back. That's the only reason why he, went after them. But he noticed that the cops were being a lot, more mean than they should be and just like being a lot more brutal than they definitely should have been. And he was just like, he was literally just like, hey, pickpocket, why don't we just like yeet out of here before like more cops come? He just like sort of like adopts you, like they just become friends. He adopts him as a friend. He's just like, let's go, fam. He was like, you literally just stole my wallet, but you seem like a good dude. And he is a good dude. He's just
a good dude.
And then he just, once again, like Speedwagon, just finds this dude, obviously so interesting that he decides to follow him around for the rest of the series. Because, I mean, it is quite interesting to see this very large man just use magic sunlight powers to destroy a cop's finger with a Coke bottle cap.
When you say it like
He was
that, it kind of sounds
obviously
ridiculous.
like, imagine being Smokey. You're just like, what is,
Yeah.
what's happening? I'm just trying to live my life. And then this dude just shows up,
This
and then he decides to follow him around, understandably.
Yeah, I mean, like if a guy who is like built like a bear when he's like 19 is like willing to like do a solid for you, like you just like hang out with that guy, you know?
Yeah. Not to mention, like, okay, I'm gonna continue my doctoral thesis here. Welcome to the next the fourth episode of why Irina is the most badass character in
Yes,
JoJo.
I was wondering
So
when you were gonna get to this part.
yep, you knew it was gonna happen. So she literally, so she's like, so her husband just dies. She watches him die. She's in a shipwreck. She's in the middle of the ocean. Nobody else around. She's pregnant. There's this random like ass baby whose mom died and who she now feels like the obligation to take care of because it's like an innocent thing that just, it's vibing and it's, its mom died. So she has this baby and she's just like vibing on the ocean. She gets rescued. The other baby gets raised by Straitso because they're in like cahoots, they're buddies. And then she like raises this kid all on her own after like going through all of this trauma, and then like turns into the most badass old lady you'd ever see.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna talk about that lovely scene when they're in the restaurant where the two of them
It's so good.
solve racism. It's fantastic. People like the two of them, Irina and Joseph, go into a restaurant with Smokey, and like this dude starts being racist. It's like, well, who let that filthy animal in here? And then like Joseph's like, I won't fight him. And then Irina's like, she literally encourages him. She was like, be mindful of the guests now, but teach him a lesson. And then she just like tells him to beat his ass for being a bad person, and he does. It's great.
Such a great scene. That, and I think so another thing that I didn't really cover in the summary, but will be slightly important later, is that Joseph is a orphan. He has no his father died in the war and his mother died of disease. So I know. We'll get to it.
I already sort of mentioned it a little bit, but blah.
Yes, but well, regardless, he has grown up without parents. Are they alive? Maybe. But
I feel like most people who are watching this have probably seen the entire show.
Yeah. But anyway, the important point is that he grew up without parents, and like Irina is his primary caregiver, and
not to mention Irina sort of raises him as well. Like
yeah, Irina is Joseph's primary caregiver in that. And so because of that, I think we sort of see some of Irina's personality through Joseph in little subtle ways. We sort of talked about in Phantom Blood how Irina is very dedicated to Jonathan. I mean, willing to put herself in physical harm to protect Jonathan. And Joseph is kind of similar in his dedication to the people that he cares about. And that's sort of the pivotal difference, is that, so like, Irina is just a very caring person in general. I mean, she takes in Smokey basically apropos nothing, and she's just kind-hearted, and Joseph is kind-hearted as well, but selectively. And similarly, Irina has like no tolerance for like assholes and racism and stuff like that, and Joseph has no tolerance for it either, but he kind of he's always looking for a fight. Something.
Yeah, he's a bit more, just impulsive. And Irina's like his impulse controlled entirely.
That's a really good way of putting it.
And
Um,
it's literally like after that first fight with like the cops, like the first thing he does is freak out, be like, "Oh no, grandma's gonna kill me.
yeah,
I lost my temper again."
rather than I just attacked two police officers with guns and stuff.
And then like
Um,
something else that's interesting is that like Speedwagon loves to give commentary. Smokey also actually gives a lot of very interesting commentary throughout it. Where he's just like, wait, he was fine with beating up the cops, but he's afraid of his grandma. And then
yeah,
there
these
was this
first,
other very insightful thing he said later, where it was like he was talking about how generous Irina was, and he said, you know, everybody around her has sort of like, her husband died, her son died, everyone's dying. Now all she has is Joseph. And he said that like she's so caring towards like more lonely people because she has felt a lot of loneliness herself. So she just feels the need to make other people feel less lonely.
yes,
Irina's
and
low-key actually a really good character.
yeah, I would say for part two, she's a really good character.
Yeah, she
Um,
needs more screen time.
maybe we'll get,
Softly. We
maybe
talked
we'll.
about how Trish was probably the most well-written female character. I feel like maybe right next to Trish is Irina.
It's a toss up between Arena and, well, I don't know. I guess there are some part four characters that are pretty that are, well, I won't say pretty well written, but are better written than earlier characters.
E.
Um,
Like
I'd also say Lisa
Tomoko.
Lisa maybe, but
Lisa Lisa's pretty good.
I
Tomoko, Josuke's mom, I love her. She's great.
yeah, but
And then Yukako's just
something will
terrifying.
definitely come. See, you're saying we need to see more Arena in general. I think we need to see more Tomoko in
Oh, we really
general.
do. We get
Um,
like 2 clips of her, but like the 2 clips that, well, actually, there's like 4. The 4 clips we get of her are pretty great.
but yeah, so I'm trying to think if there is anything else specific I wanted to talk about. Oh,
Stroheim.
yeah, Stroheim.
Let's not forget that Stroheim was introduced. The
Stroheim,
Nazis are here.
we are not at the pinnacle of Stroheim,
Oh no, not
but
even close. The pinnacle.
Major von Stroheim is definitely in one of my top five favorite JoJo characters, and I hate admitting that because he's a Nazi, but
He's comedic.
he is
Especially, oh my god.
so fun to watch.
I want to
I
go
think
off on a tangent about the dub.
yeah,
The dub.
he's
The part 2 dub, I love it so much.
featuring Nigel Uno from Codename Kids Next Door as Joseph.
What's that
Joestar.
voice actor's name?
I can't remember the voice actor's name.
I love him as Joseph though. He vibes with it so hard. Like I feel there's like a few lines that are like he just makes it so fun. It's just the vibe that he has is like perfect for Joseph. He brings a good shitlordiness to it. Of course, in Japanese, like that was done spectacularly as well. But it's just interesting. Like most of the Japanese voice like performances in anime are usually pretty good. There's only like maybe like 2 animes where I prefer the dub over the sub. One of them being Full Metal Alchemist. But
Cowboy Bebop is definitely up there in that category.
Oh yes, Cowboy Bebop definitely. But most of the time, it's like usually like there's a couple in which the dub is pretty solid. With JoJo, the dub is not the best, but like I feel like it's the best that it could be for the situation that they are in.
It's passable, I think.
Especially in part 3, I had to think about it. I was just like, well, it's the kind of show that you definitely have to watch in the original Japanese because I remember you once said it's such a uniquely Japanese show that you just sort of have to watch it like that. And then like if you want to watch it again, maybe check out the dub because like for the materials that the people who dubbed it were given, they actually did like a pretty good job with it. Because just think of like the kind of how else could they have possibly done some of those iconic lines without being a little bit like cringy just because like it's sort of impossible to make like a perfect a perfect JoJo dub. So I think the dubs are like as good as they can be.
Mm-hmm.
So that's and also like, Nigel Uno. It's
And
fantastic. And Arnold Schwarzenegger. Literally, they made Stroheim like the dude that they picked to be his dub actor. They literally probably just like told him, "Do your best Arnold Schwarzenegger impression that you possibly can for this," and then you're solid, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, speaking of Von Stroheim, though, I do want to say one thing about what we see of him is that
He's a bastard man,
he is a bastard man. Absolutely,
as
he
most Part 2 characters are.
tortures people, but at the same time, you do sort of get like Von Stroheim's motivation is not that he hates Jewish people; it's that he wants Germany to be the strongest country. If that
German
makes any
science
sense.
is the best in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
He's just really, he's just so patriotic.
And because of that,
in where it's bad.
yes,
But, like, it's funny.
I mean, Von Stroheim's going to be a hard character to talk about because he is so fun. I think he is so integral to Part Two's identity.
Oh yes, just like.
But he's also a Nazi, and he's a major supporting character.
It's just like they literally team up with the Nazis to defeat the Pillar Men.
But you do
only one Nazi.
You see flickers of Von Stroheim's moral philosophy. It's a twisted moral philosophy, but he does have certain elements of him that are good. He doesn't believe in torturing Speedwagon, not just because he doesn't believe in torturing Speedwagon. There's the scene where they're trying so the Nazis are trying to bring back the Pillar Man by like pumping blood into it, and like the way they decide how they're going to do that is that Von Stroheim
kidnaps civilians.
He has this cage of people and like Mexican people, and like whoever like comes forward is the one who he will spare. Like he admires
bravery and
self-sacrifice. And self-sacrifice. Yes, exactly. Which are probably like two of Von Stroheim's like major character elements. But like I said, we're not at like pinnacle Von Stroheim yet.
Oh no, we're not at Cyborg Stroheim yet.
Yeah.
Stroheim is he's just so funny. It's one thing that wait, what?
I always summarize JoJo's Bizarre Adventure like in terms of like the level of weirdness by saying this show has both vampires and Nazi cyborgs.
Yeah. That's it. That's it.
It's like a Wolfenstein.
David Bowie impersonators with hand fetishes. Several David Bowie impersonators, actually.
But
one
I'm
of
sorry,
which is a serial killer.
I cut you off. Were you gonna say something about Von Stroheim?
Oh yes, wait, what was I gonna say? I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah, one thing that I'm gonna compare JoJo to another piece of media with a very similar name, Jojo Rabbit. That lovely movie. That recently came out that I absolutely loved. They have approximately 3 things in common. 1, JoJo. That's just the name JoJo. 2, Nazis, and 3, David Bowie references. So. And
Hitler is the Rowan Griffin Davis'
and
character.
Stan. Let's not forget.
Let's
not forget that Hitler is JoJo's stand in the movie. It's fantastic. Okay, so the reason I brought it up is because I feel like the 2 pieces of media sort of portray Nazis in a very similar way. They don't like show them to be scary. They show them to be kind of dumb.
Yes.
They're just like, they're kind of like everyone knows that like their philosophy was really stupid.
Their philosophy was based on like like comic books, essentially.
Yes, it was just like, you know, in JoJo, it's like, yes, Joseph teams up with the Nazis, and it's just, and then it's like von Stroheim is like, he's kind of like, you know, he's portrayed not as a good person because he's a Nazi, but he's also like shown to be really funny and kind of dumb. Like he screws up a lot.
He has more complexity to him than an average
Then
Nazi
you're
in, say, like Hunters or Wolfenstein or something like that. And that complexity is that he's dumb, like
yeah.
earnestly so.
And then like in Jojo Rabbit, like the movie, I love how they both have Jojo in them. In
Yeah.
Jojo Rabbit, you literally just have like most characters in that show are Nazis. And they're all like they're all portrayed in a very comedic light because they're, you know, they're all kind of dumb. Like Hitler was like literally like his imaginary friend, and he just said really dumb things sometimes.
Yes.
Like, and he would like literally like just jump out of windows. He was like, oh, like I think there was a scene where like his mom was coming up to check on him, and then like Hitler's like, oh no, like I'll see you later, and he's an imaginary like friend. He's not really there, and he just like dolphin dives out the window. Like Hitler out. Here we go.
I have two things to say. One, if you guys haven't seen Jojo Rabbit, absolutely do. It's a terrific
so good.
movie. But also, if you haven't and you're still listening to this, we must just sound insane.
Yes, it has a similar wacky vibe. I feel like Taika Waititi has seen JoJo's Bizarre Adventures before.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I'm gonna add him on Twitter. I remember we were joking yesterday how we should try to get Araki on the show and have tea with him. We should get Taika Waititi on the show too. Both of them at the same time.
I just want to talk to Taika Waititi, and I mean, he just seems like a really chill guy.
He seems like a very nice person. I would totally vibe with him.
Anyway, any last minute thoughts on these first two episodes of Battle Tendency? Any last minute funny things, serious things?
I might have several. I'm trying to like, I do have one thing that like, I discovered only just today that I feel like the reason that I love JoJo so much and that it's like a borderline obsession, like it's consumed my life. I mean, I'm like, the two of us are making a whole podcast about it. Like,
Yeah,
Jesus Christ.
yeah.
I feel like the reason I noticed that, like, you know, there's obviously those shows and like books and movies out there that are like incredibly good, like borderline perfect. But I tend to talk about them less because it's just like they're so perfect. There's like, you can only talk about what is good. Like Avatar: The Last Airbender, that show is like literally borderline perfection. It's like as close to perfection as a show can get. I'm sorry, I'm hyping it up for you. I don't want to hype it up for you too much, Thomas.
2 more weeks, Emily. 2 more weeks.
But it is probably it's definitely one of the best, like most well-written things I've ever seen in my life. And of course I talk about it a lot because it's so good and there's so many reasons why it's so good. But I feel like especially like I just fully am up Araki's ass right now because it's like, because this, like, you know, the story isn't perfect. It's like there's several parts, I've said this before, like there's several parts of it that are done like flawlessly, but then there's also other parts that are like severely lacking. And I feel like that's why I can make an entire podcast about JoJo and not an entire podcast about other shows, because there's so much to talk about. Because on one hand, it's a good show. On the other hand, there's several flaws and there's several things left unanswered. So it gives you more to talk about. So that it's just an interesting thing. I've gotten with, it's like that's why I've noticed I have, like, for example, like a book that I am currently reading is Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. And I've been constantly, like, our group chat is literally called, after a very funny conversation, our group chat is literally called the Ayn Rand Kink Appreciation and Acceptance Club, because I like, if all y'all that have read like any of her books know that her philosophy is like severely just incorrect and completely wrong, but at the same time, like, she's actually a very good writer and creates very interesting characters, and like like very realistic characters and like pretty interesting stories. So like that's why I've read 3 of her books, because I am both like, I have something to both praise and argue with at the same time. Like I'm marking up this giant 1,000-page book constantly, because it's like, oh, it's either like, oh, this was described very interestingly, or like this was very problematic, you know? It's because there's like this duality there where it's not entirely perfect, that I can get more into it because there's simply more to talk about. And you know, people get obsessed with things that they hate and people get obsessed with things that they like. So if it's like, if some things make you just want to shake a Rocky's hand and say you did a good job, and other things make you want to fight the man, then you got a good like recipe for an obsession there. And that is my statement. That is what I have to say.
Okay. Good way to tie it in, though, because I think human flaw is a big theme of Battle Tendency. And the show itself is flawed in
nobody
certain ways.
in that, you know, none of the characters are like entirely good people except our Queen Irina, but you know.
All right, so
Lord, and I love him.
Yeah, yes. So with all that said, if you want to see all the silly, goofy stuff that I post about on Twitter, you can follow me at Thomas M. Brickman on Twitter. You can also listen to the other podcast I do called Post Game Content, where me and my buddy Kev talk about video game news, reviews, what we've been playing, different silly topics for each week. It's a lot of fun. If you want to listen to that, you can find it here on YouTube, and you can also follow the show's Twitter at PostGameCon. That's at PostGameCon on Twitter. If you want to keep up to date with all the show's news and goings on.
You could also see all of the absolutely terrible, angry, and also silly rants that I go on Twitter at Emily Winkles. That is my name. That is my Twitter.
And if you want
a variety of things.
And if you want to keep up to date with all the show's news, all the goofy memes that Emily keeps finding, which are all just, it's beautiful. You can follow the show on Twitter at I Want to Fight Araki. That's at I Want to Fight RAR1. And I Want to Fight Araki on Instagram. So
the content on those 2 platforms will get significantly better soon, I promise.
And
all I have to do is steal memes and make memes. I will do the things.
We're working hard to bring you that hardcore meme loving content.
Trying to get you some good JoJo content, guys. This is important.
And with all that said, we'll see you guys next week when we cover season 1 episodes 12 and 13, Battle Tendency episodes 2 or 3 and 4 for next week. We'll see you guys then.